Hey there, welcome back. Today I want to talk about something really cool in React Router version 7, and that's the magical context that's hidden behind the scenes, and it's not kind of covered in the docs, and it's kind of magical, so I just want to go over it and explain how it works and what you can do with it, some tips and tricks and stuff like that. So you can have some fun on your next project or use the knowledge on the existing one. It's really up to you. So I've prepared this example here, and if you imagine that you have your root TSX, so this is for the framework mode. This is not the same as it is for the library mode. So imagine that we have a root TSX file, and then the root TSX is your shell. So the same as an index.ts file that loads the React app. So kind of like that. So let's say you have this route. So you have a layout, and if you wanna stick to the convention, this would be a layout with a lower score before it. Then you have your user's TSX and your user ID as a child route. So the root route is on the top. Then from it, you have the layout route. The users uses the layout route. So it's a child of the layout. And then the user ID is the child of the user's TSX. And it's basically going from top to bottom. And the cool thing about React Router version 7 that you might not know is that each one of these routes has a context provider wrapped around the rest of the app, and it provides the context through the outlet. So for example, if we have a root TSX here, so this would be your root TSX. The root TSX itself provides a wrapper around your whole app, providing you with the ability to access the loader data that's returned from the root TSX. And then if we continue onwards with our example, so if I make a smaller circle, and let's make it even smaller like this, make it blue. So this would be your layout.tsx. And I'm gonna put it here. So what this means is everything wrapped with root has access to the root loader data. Everything wrapped with layout has access to the layout data. So for example, you could access the loader data in here that's returned from the layout, but you can also access the root TSX loader data. And there are two ways to do that, which I'll show you later on, but that's something important to note. And then if we continue with this example, and if I draw an even smaller circle and put it inside of the layout, I'm gonna color it the same as the user's TSX. So this would be your user's TSX. And then again, the same story. So user's TSX is wrapped with the layout and the root. It has access to the layout loader data. It has access to the root loader data, and it has access to its own loader data. And then you would never guess what the fourth one is. So the fourth one is the user ID. So user ID.tsx. And if I plop it in here, again, the same story. It has access to this loader data, to this loader data, to this loader data, and it has access to its own. So how it works is, it basically, if you think of it in a React way, it means that the root TSX provides a context provider, then the layout provides its own context provider, and then your user's TSX provides its own, and then your user ID provides its own. So if I draw it like this, you can see that it just keeps providing context providers, and these are kind of optimized so they don't re-render when they are not supposed to, so you don't really have to think about it. But what's important about this is the fact that each of these nested components, or in our case modules or routes, has access to the parent's loader data. So why is this cool? So for example, let's say, so this is your root TSX, right? Because it's the same color as above, so root TSX is green. And let's say you have an app, so it has a dashboard, and this dashboard, for example, let's draw a simple dashboard here. This would be your root TSX, and I'm gonna change these colors to blue because the sidebar and the header are gonna be your layout. And then, for example, you have your user's screen here, and then inside of it, you, for example, have an open user. So let's say a user list would be here. So these would be your users. So for example, user 1, user 2, so user 1, user 2. And then when you click on them, you get your user ID on the right. So for example, like this. All right, so what's really cool about this? So for example, let's imagine that you are currently logged in. So this root TSX here would return the user data. So for example, you return your user data, so the currently logged in user or yourself, you return this data from the root loader. And then all of these subloaders here have access to that user object. And for example, if you return the currently selected user here, for example, user 1 was selected, you would both have access to the user 1 and the user here. And what's really cool about this is that you can use the data from your parent loaders to showcase it in some nested routes instead of fetching the data in the nested routes as well. And another benefit of this is for example, in the layout here, if you want to show the user info, for example, here, you can just access the root loader user data and then show it inside of the layout route. And whenever the user data changes in the root, the layout route is going to change automatically without you having to do anything. And this is really powerful because if you have it in like 3 places, for example, you have the user data here, and then for example, let's say you want to check if, for example, let's say we have 3 users here, and this third user, so user 3, is the user that's currently logged in, then we can just make this, for example, have a different look on the UI. So for example, this user 3 is equal to the user, so this one is grayed out, selected, whatever. And then you know, okay, this info belongs to the logged in user. And there's a bunch of cool other stuff you can do with this, but I'm just giving you an example of how you can benefit from using loader data. And now I'm gonna switch over to the actual code, and I'm gonna show you how you can actually use this information across your app. So let's switch to VS Code. All right, so we're in VS Code, and I'm gonna be using our base stack to show you what I want to show you. So if I open up the layout here, it renders a title called layout, and then it renders the outlet. The layout.users does the same thing, and the layout.users.userid does the same thing. So let's run this. And if I zoom in a little bit, so this is the path user/1. So if I open up DevTools and I kind of zoom out so we can actually see what's going on, we're gonna clear this and let's explore this together. So check this out. So this is the root, and as you can see, it returns some loader data, and it returns the language and the client environment. And then all the other routes don't have any loaders, so they just render and that's it. And now let's actually add some loaders. So if I switch back to VS Code and I actually go to the layout, and for example, in the layout, we want to, for example, create a loader, and that loader is gonna return, for example, the title. So for example, the layout title. And then we're gonna go to layout.users, and then we're gonna create another loader here. And it's gonna return a users array. And we're gonna say ID name John Doe, ID 2, name Jane Doe. Alright, perfect. This is why I love AI. And we're gonna save this, and then we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna create another loader, and it's gonna return not the title but the active user. So for example, active user, ID is 1, name is John Doe. And for the sake of it, just imagine this is a real life scenario where you're actually fetching real life data. And as you can see, all of these re-triggered. And if I switch back to the browser, you can see that now the root loader returns the same stuff, but the other routes return different stuff. So for example, the layout route returns the title as we defined it. The loader data from the user's TSX returns the users array. And then the last piece of the puzzle returns the active user. So you can see it here. So what does this mean for us? So let's say I wanted to know if the active user, so the user that's here, actually is contained in the array that's returned by the parent. So how can I do this? Well, let's go back to VS Code. So how do we do this? There are two ways at the moment. So the first one, and this is the old way of doing it, or actually there are three ways. So the first one is with useMatches. So matches is useMatches. It's imported from React Router, believe it or not. And then you would have, so let's first log the matches. So if I go back to the browser and I open up the console, and if I open up this array, you can see all the matches here. And this is what I was talking about. So on the users.userid route here, you have access to all the parents above it. And as you can see, it's returned as an array, and you can access the data from each one of these. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna access the data from this route. And this is where React Router development tools comes in handy, because you can just come here and copy this ID. And if I go back to the VS Code, I can just say const match is matches find. So a potential match is match.id is equal to the user's route. So if the match is not found, we're gonna throw. So this is not gonna be the case. But if it's found, we're gonna access the users. So because we know that the data is there, we're gonna say match data.users. And I think this can be undefined. Yes. And as you can see, this is unknown. So we're gonna cast this as any. And now we have our users. So if I console log this, and if I go back to our browser, you can see that I got the users array. But the issue with this, it's not type safe. So how you can make it type safe is, if I go back to our VS Code, I can export a type from here. So useRouteLoaderData is equal to return type of loader. So if I hover over this, it's gonna be a users array. And then I can import it into here. And then I can remove this. And as you can see, the users are there. So what I can do is I can compare it to the active user. So for example, if I did const data is equal to useLoaderData, and then here I do type of loader. So the data is gonna contain the active user. So I can say const active user is equal to data active user. And then what I can see is const found user is users find match the ID. And if I do this and save it, and I actually go back to the browser, you can see that this didn't crash, it re-rendered, which means the user was actually found. So that's pretty cool. But if I go back to the VS Code, you can see that this is pretty dirty. And this here is just a huge code smell, and you have no type safety. So that's the first way you can do it. The second one, which I which is obviously preferred to this one, is by using another hook, and we're gonna say data2 for now, and I'm gonna say use route loader data, and I'm gonna pass it the user loader data. And then here you pass it again the same thing as down below, so the ID of the route. And this just takes the data from the context, and it's either defined or not. So you can see it's either users array or undefined. So what is good about this is that we can do users, or actually we're gonna do user data, and then instead of doing this, we're gonna remove this, and we're gonna say if not user data, and then instead of doing this casting and then all of these unsafe things, what we're gonna be able to do is, because this is already throwing if it's not there, we're gonna say that users is equal to user data.users. And then if I remove this, we get better type safety with 0 downsides, because this is identical to the approach before. And then we can also remove the question mark here, because now we know it's defined and we're a lot more safer than before. So this is pretty cool. But I'm gonna show you the best way to do it, and that's by using the new and improved React Router 7 feature, and that's by importing type. Oh, look at this, it's already there. So if I do route.ComponentProps, and this is supposed to be layout with a lowercase, and I save this, and I can actually access matches from here. But check this out now. So instead of doing this, I can say matches dot, and then as you can see, 0, 1, and 2 match what I need. So I need matches 1. If I'm not, oh no, so I need matches 2. So this gives you an array of all the parent matches. So what's so cool about matches 2 is that it gives you the exact shape you need. The only difference is it gives you all the stuff the route has, so the params, the ID, the path name, the data, and the handle. So for example here, instead of doing user data.users, we only change this to data, and the code remains identical, but we have full type safety. So if I save this, we remove the types we created earlier. We don't need to export this type anymore, we just save it. And if I go back here, again, we get the same approach as before. And let's say I wanted to use, so let's say in the root, here I also return the user as ID3 name potato dough, and I save this. And let's say I wanted to access this inside of the user ID. So let's say root data is equal to matches 0, and then root data.data.user, and I can actually access the root data from here. And what's cool about this is that you don't really need to do anything besides just accessing it. And as you can see, as soon as I save it, it automatically behind the scenes refreshes the types. So I don't really have to worry if the type changed or if I need to restart the TypeScript server, the favorite thing that everybody loves to do. And I can actually access the ID of the user that's logged in. So for example, const logged in user ID is equal to this. And I actually got the logged in user ID just by taking it from matches. And you can even, instead of doing root data, you can just do this. And that's pretty much it. So if I save this, we again have type safety, we get what we need, and it's pretty awesome. And if I could even remove this, I think, because now we know that the user data is defined, because we know that this is a child route of something. So this would have to stay, but depending on your code, maybe it wouldn't. So maybe you could even remove this. And that's pretty much it. And this is how you can use the React Router version 7 context in your favor to actually access data from parents without actually refetching them. So what you would traditionally have to do is something like const logged in user is equal to some fetch call to whatever, or however you fetch it from the database. Then you would have to return this, and then on the client you would have to access it from the data, and so on and so forth. So if you already fetched it on some higher level, you already have access to it. So this is pretty dang cool. And that's pretty much it for today. I just wanted to share this with you and show you why I loved it so much. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. But I think this is pretty cool. And I get a lot of questions on where to put some data pieces in. So the rule of thumb here is try to balance it out. So for example, you might think, hey, it makes a lot of sense to put everything in the root loader. But after a while, if you put like 50 database calls in here, it will fetch it all the time. So be really careful. React Router gives you all the levers you need, but you should try to pull them with some care, because you can end up in a situation you don't like. And if you want to optimize your application, you might want to spread around some info. So for example, it would be maybe enticing if you have a dashboard. So let's say this layout is a dashboard layout. You actually know that the user is gonna be defined here. You can maybe fetch the user here. And then all the dashboard routes have them. But for example, if you want to log in, then the layout route should not have the user, and then you don't want to fetch it on the root. So it really depends on the application you're building. And this is like the easiest way you can fetch users. And the last thing I wanted to show you, now that I've covered all of these tricks, is you can actually create helper hooks. For example, here, you can create useRouteLoaderData. And what this is gonna do is gonna, whoops, I forgot to put const here. So what this can do is const data is equal to useRouteLoaderData. It's gonna fetch from here, so routes layout users, and then if the data is not defined, it's gonna throw an error, or actually not no data found, but yeah, so useRouteLoaderData must be used inside a route. No, so this is not true. Inside a route that is a child of layout.users. And then if you use this in a wrong place, it's gonna throw an error, and then you get this data defined, and we're also gonna type it, so type of loader. And then we actually, if I hover over this, you can see we get the same thing. And then you can export this and use it inside of here as well. So that's like the last way you can do it. And personally, I would highly recommend you use this method if the matches one doesn't suit you. So this is, for example, matches is great if you're accessing it inside of a module. But for example, if you have a random route that has components, so for example, you have const, I don't know, user profile component, and that component does not have access to the matches because only the default export from this route has matches. So what you can do here is you can say const data is equal to useRouteLoaderData. You import it from wherever it came from, and then you can do user profile, and for example, you can do data.users.0.name. And then you get the user profile here, and then you can render it like this. And then I save this, and that's pretty much it. So that's all the ways you can actually access the data. It's really up to you how you do it. I think I showed you all the ways. And I would either do it with matches here if you're accessing it on the route module level. And if it's inside of a component, I would export it from the place it came from, so it's co-located with the rest of the code, and then access it from there. And then you can just do the standard context stuff. If it's not in a context provider, just throw an error, and that way in development you catch it on early. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye!